popularly known as the Barefoot Bandit because of his propensity for committing crimes without wearing shoes, became a media sensation and developed a rabid online following. Some hailed him as a modern-day folk hero. Others denounced his crimes, citing the enormous amount of property stolen from victims. Can you believe that this teenager known as the Barefoot Bandit has finally been arrested on June 13, 2010 by the police of the Bahamas? The teenager wanted by American authorities was arrested after his stolen plane crashed on Youth Island. He is 19 years old and named Colton. He may face severe punishment for his involvement in dozens of charges, including the theft of 5 planes. How did this teenage boy turn to theft? What operations was he involved in? And why were the police unable to catch him for years? These and other questions will be answered in the upcoming minutes of today's video. Colton was born in Mount Vernon, Washington, and grew up in his mother's house on Camano Island. Neighbors said they made several calls to Child Protective Services, believing he was neglected or abused. His father, Gordon, used drugs and was in prison while Colton was a toddler. When he was 12 years old, his father, who had recently been released, walked into the woods after an argument at a family barbecue, was subsequently arrested and not heard from again. The mother raised her son on Camano Island, where they struggled financially, living out a meager existence in a ramshackle single-wide trailer. Pamela struggled with alcoholism, resulting in an unstable and often abusive environment. Colton began exhibiting behavioral issues at an early age. According to his mother, Pamela, his stepfather died when he was about 7 years old, and from the time Colton was in the 1st grade, she knew there was something off about him, sort of a disconnection. He would not listen to his teachers, started altercations at school, and would sometimes deliberately break things around the house. According to a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, Colton said that his mother drank and became mean, breaking his possessions. He started living in the wild at the age of 7 and would break into vacation homes in the area, stealing blankets, food, and water before disappearing into the forest for days. His first conviction for stolen property came at age 12, and by the time he was 13, he had 3 more. He has been diagnosed with depression, attention deficit disorder, and intermittent explosive disorder. Each conviction brought a 10-day stay in a detention center or community service. His mother once said, "Every time he had anything any good, everyone thought he stole it." What does that do to a kid? In 2003, police found a neighbor's camcorder in his home. Never before sentenced to more than a month, he was given a 3-year juvenile sentence and was housed at the Green Hill School in Chehalis. He was transferred to a halfway house in Renton, where he fled by walking out of the facility in April 2008. 2 years after this date, Colton escaped from a shelter in Bremerton, Washington, at the age of 17. His story became a legend, and his legend will soon become a distant history. It is known that he was arrested at the age of 15 for breaking into homes, stealing valuable items, and then selling them online for profit. He was sentenced to 3 years, but he managed to escape. Afterwards, extensive search operations were conducted to find him. 2 separate agencies were tasked with searching for him and apprehending him. The agents of these agencies were equipped with the latest types of rifles and had the authority to stop him if necessary. Police received a call from an unknown person claiming to have seen the teenager near a store on the same night. However, when the police arrived, they could not find him, even though surveillance cameras had documented his presence there just minutes earlier. The police speculated that he had entered the forest to hide, as he usually did. This is what he did every time, as he knew the secrets of the forest better than the police. Chris, the police department chief, said that on that night one of the officers came to him asking if he knew Colton. When he answered yes, the officer informed him that he had escaped. The police chief was not happy with the news because he knew that Colton would return to his old habits of robbery. This was confirmed by one of the store owners named Peden McLean, who said he always suffered losses. When he inspects his goods, he always finds that part of it has been stolen. He always finds that the money in the cash registers is decreasing. Due to Colton, he now checks the store every half hour and checks everything around him. In the same week, the police announced that 9 robberies had occurred in the past 2 weeks throughout Island County. but they could not confirm whether any of these operations were related to Colton. Colton followed a professional escape route where he would steal from homes and stores and then disappear into the Camano forest. The residents of the city noticed strange things where purchases were being made through their credit cards without their knowledge. The purchases included computers, computer equipment, and other devices. They spent money on all these items without knowing or even seeing them when they arrived. Colton knew the forest well, knowing every path and where it led. He would cleverly prepare a place to sleep without leaving any evidence or trace. Chief Chris said that whenever they found his campsite, they found that he had been 2 steps ahead. Colton's former friend Harley, who used to help him for a while to share the profits, confirmed that he knew Colton from school. They used to rob houses together. Where he says he was looking for money while Colton was searching for computers and credit cards. They targeted vacation homes, whose owners had left them during that period. They found large sums of money and computers still in good condition. Additionally, in 2007, he managed to find a Mercedes-Benz car inside a garage of one of the houses. Every time they would take it from there, go on a tour, refill it with fuel, then return it to its place after cleaning it. Harley also adds that Colton taught him not to stay in one place for more than 2 days and to sleep in different places each night. Marley Jant, a journalist working at COM04 Radio, said they were required to talk about Colton and what he did every day. People were eager to hear the story of this young man who puzzled the police, although they knew his whereabouts. They couldn't arrest him. On Saturday morning, the deputy police chief announced that someone had broken into his house and stolen a rifle and a laptop. On the same day, someone else broke into the fire station. On the other hand, a report from Rob Erickson, the head of the Northern Office, stated that the prime suspect was Colton. Investigators confirmed that there was no tangible evidence linking Colton to the fire station break-in. However, it was coincidental that a year ago, he had robbed a house located on the other side of the fire station, and twice when he attempted to break into the fire station. He knew there were infrared cameras, but he still managed to break in. Authorities launched a widespread campaign to search for him, led by the K9 unit, which searched the areas surrounding all the houses that had been robbed. They also traced most of the paths Colton could cross, but to no avail. His mother, Pam, says that one morning while she was preparing breakfast, she heard someone knocking on the door. When she opened it, she found her son, Colton, hungry. After breakfast, he left without saying anything. Minutes later, police officers arrived at her house and began asking her questions about her son and when she last saw him. She told them he had come home that morning, which angered the police and investigators because she let him in without informing them. However, she loudly declared that he was her son, and since he was hungry, she had to feed him. Eventually, the police left the house, leaving one of them to monitor her movements. A witness said it was shameful for the police because Colton was close to them, just 3 kilometers away every time, and he was still in the city. He stole a rifle and a computer from their deputy chief, all without them being able to do anything. One of his friends said he met Colton for the first time at the Green Hill Institute, which is a highly secure facility. He talked to him and learned from his words that he was an intelligent man who loved psychology and criminology. He told him that his only goal in life was to become a professional criminal. Jackson Holmes, a writer, said Colton's choice of such a small place, which contains large stores, groceries, and also a significant percentage of tourists every year, reflects his professional mindset. Teresa Lancaster, the owner of one of the stores there, said that one day when she opened the store, she somehow learned that Colton, the teenager known as the cockroach, had entered her shop. She added that he climbed over the 3-meter fence, then climbed onto the store's roof to enter through the second-floor window. He began taking what he needed. She also found the safe and opened it by hitting it with a crowbar found in the store, taking approximately $13,000. One day, a surveillance camera installed at a restaurant there captured him holding a credit card. He ordered a set of instructional materials on flying, which he sent to the restaurant by mail. When they arrived at the restaurant, he broke in the following night and stole them. Colton set up camp in the mountains and immersed himself in seclusion. He was like a ghost, invisible and elusive. But his real journey was about to begin now at Youth Airport. It was his chance to turn his dream into reality. His mother adds that during his childhood, he read about an American pilot in a magazine and decided then to become a pilot too. Every time he saw a plane in the sky, he said he could do it too. Whenever he saw a plane, he began to wonder who made it and what engine it had. Returning to Colton, he went to the airport to observe it. His plan was to steal a plane from there and fly away. Colton put his plan into action. Through his camp, he began studying how to fly planes using various manuals and online videos. He also observed the coming and going of small planes on Orcas Island. One night, Colton decided to carry out the operation. Slowly, he dragged himself behind the airport, then towards one of the small single-seat planes and headed towards the runway. He helped himself aboard and started it up, as he had learned from his studies. Within minutes, he was flying in the air without his presence being detected. He seemed to be in control, but in a moment of distraction, the plane's engine began to stall and then started again on its own. The winds began to play with the plane before he lost control and crashed it to the ground. Initially, the authorities thought it was someone involved in illegal substances who had stolen it. What made Colton a legend was his disappearance after the crash, disappearing into the forest in the blink of an eye without being noticed. Colton's fortified area covered about 120,000 acres. Meanwhile, the police were still searching for him everywhere. One night, 3 guards found a tent they thought belonged to Colton. Inside, they found some of his belongings, indicating he hadn't gone far and would return. During that time, Colton had acquired a small dog and had started raising it. This was found by the police that night, and they confiscated it in an animal shelter. They knew how much Colton loved his dog. Perhaps he planned to retrieve it. The next morning, Colton's mother learned of the incident and contacted the animal shelter to request its return, but they refused. The police considered it a lead that could lead to the strange suspect. Despite the police's demands, the guards at the shelter failed to remain vigilant. Colton managed to sneak into the shelter, retrieve his dog, and escape back into the forest. Harley, his friend, recalls one day meeting Colton in a car he didn't know where it came from. He took him to a nearby house near the forest where he lived. Colton entered the house, unaware that 2 policemen were inside waiting for him. He invited Harley in too, and the duo headed to the kitchen. They started eating, and at that moment, while Colton was holding a glass of juice, 2 armed policemen came out, repeating loudly, "You 2 are under arrest." Harley froze in place while Colton continued drinking the juice, indifferent to what was happening. Suddenly he dropped the glass, and as Harley adds, all of this happened in the blink of an eye. As the glass fell, Colton quickly dashed out like lightning from one of the nearby doors, while Harley ran to find one of the doors open and then exited. They continued to flee, leaving the policemen behind. In a moment, the 2 friends found themselves facing a wall of grass, but thanks to their agility, they managed to jump over it on the first try, while the policemen couldn't catch up with them. In the following days, Colton became even more dangerous than before. He began to commit multiple thefts on various islands, and what the surveillance cameras captured was a barefoot person entering the store at night wearing a type of coat that obscured his face. He would then steal whatever he wanted and leave. He was responsible for stealing more than 30,000 from ATMs. Camera footage showed him using a large iron rod to smash the machines until they disconnected from the power source. Then he would steal whatever was accessible. The robberies had become significantly dangerous crimes, affecting several areas. The owner of a tomato store stated that the store's surveillance cameras captured a barefoot person breaking in through an external window, disabling approximately 14 cameras and stealing $10,000 before fleeing. Additionally, Colton was accused of stealing 2 planes, as well as becoming known for boat thefts. His story spread during that period, earning him the nickname the Barefoot Bandit above the law's reach. Will his theft operation stop at this point? Will the police be able to catch him this time, or will he remain elusive? This is what we'll discover in the second part of this story. A teenager mastered theft at an early age, and his operations expanded to the point of terrifying local residents in neighboring areas, baffling the police who failed to apprehend him. His thefts included stores, homes, as well as airports and ports. What are the next operations that the barefoot thief will undertake? Will the police be able to apprehend him? Or does the future hold other surprises? Questions and more will be answered in the coming minutes of today's video. What's strange is the testimonies that emerge days after a trip to Canada. A group of people there, including a musician in a folk band named James Donald, encountered a barefoot person while he was driving his big car down a long tree-lined street. Suddenly, his car broke down, and as he went out to check, he noticed a person wearing a black coat and barefoot approaching him. James thought he might be attacked or robbed, but the person asked him for a ride to the north, where James was actually heading. They rode together without speaking, and on the way, they came across police officers. Colton hid, and after they passed, he took a break in the middle of the forest where he ate. The next morning, he continued his journey, and shortly after, James gave Colton $10 he had and some food, then dropped him off at Highway 3. James adds that he didn't know who the boy was until 2 weeks later when he saw a news report stating that there was a boy named Colton who had fled from the United States to Canada and was one of the most dangerous thieves. At that moment, James realized he had given a ride to a person with two personas, the kind one he traveled with all the time and the thief who terrorized America. Colton had found a new, clean place where no one knew him, allowing him to commit thefts freely. John Richard, a friend of Colton's, recalls that one day Colton contacted him to meet there, and John agreed. When he went to meet him, Colton was driving a BMW, and after the ride, during which they barely spoke, John saw a black bag full of money. Colton asked him to show him where the nearest airport was from their meeting place, and he pointed him to an airport there. Colton didn't want him to stay long to avoid implicating him. 2 days later, Colton stole a plane from that airport and flew over Canada until he saw a place called Granite Falls. There, he noticed a forest with a flat green area at the end, so he decided to land there. As he approached the descent, just a few meters away, he noticed that the area had tree trunks, which caused the plane to crash upon landing. Colton suffered some pain before managing to escape again without being seen by anyone. Dan Lewis, a resident of the area, says he saw smoke rising near the forest before confirming that there was a crashed plane in the area. He informed the sheriff of the area. The police were notified and armed forces, along with dogs, were deployed to the borders. 2 helicopters were also dispatched to search for the perpetrator. Returning to Colton, he continued walking despite his injuries before finding a house near the forest belonging to the couple Bob and Shafala Glairine. Shafala received a message from her mother saying that a plane had crashed near her house and asked her to go there to see if there were any survivors. After the couple returned home, they found that the food was missing, along with their passports. Bob contacted the police. One of the officers, along with his team, was informed, and they extinguished all car lights to be able to trap Colton if he returned. At one point, a policeman heard faint noise coming from the forest before ordering the dogs to be released and entering to search for the fugitive. Due to the surprise, Colton couldn't carry anything with him, including his bag of money containing about $20,000. On the third day, the area was surrounded by authorities, and what they considered an armed criminal was apprehended. Despite this, nothing was found. What increased the fear of the area's residents was when a firefighter reported that his car had been stolen. A woman also said that late at night she heard noise from the lower floor of her house, and upon sneaking there, she saw a tall person holding a flashlight and wandering the house. Despite all these statements, nothing was confirmed over time. Colton became the talk of the city and the entire state as he photographed himself with a camera he had previously stolen and left the picture somewhere deliberately, where it was found by a citizen. Accompanying it was a paper with, "I am Colton Mom, I'll try," written on it. The picture spread as it began to be printed on clothes alongside the phrase, "Mom, I'll try." His name was also written on the walls of several streets, and several videos were spread on YouTube. Some narrated the story of Colton, the teenage hero who managed to make the police look like fools, and some even sang songs praising the theft operation executed by Colton. Colton also created a page on Facebook, which on its first day reached more than 83,000 likes. Thousands of messages were received from people who began to consider him one of them and their hero. The t-shirts featuring his face became the top-selling items. The mayor of San Juan County states that one day he decided to search alone in the forest for Colton. On his way, he saw him far away, but when he approached, Colton disappeared quickly as if he had a time machine and evaporated in front of him. Chris Ellis, the head of the police department, confirms that one day while he was walking with a deputy director of one of the schools, he suddenly noticed that the school door was open. Chris thought there might be a thief who had entered there. He prepared himself and opened the door and entered the school. On their way, they saw the drawers and cabinets were open as if the intruder was looking for something specific. After a few minutes, the deputy director approached one of the doors that he heard a sound behind. He opened it, shocking Chris Ellis, who saw Colton there, meaning he was the one who invaded the place. But he disappeared without giving Chris time to pull out his gun and try to scare him. John Davis, a friend of Colton's father, confirms that the boy was extremely kind but faced challenges due to his knowledge of his father's absence, which made him try to prove himself. When he failed, he decided to take the wrong path where proving oneself could be easier. Jordan, his father, abandoned the family when Colton was 2 years old, often being absent for periods and eventually leaving a note saying he would not return. Jordan, a former pilot in the U.S. Air Force, had many certificates that tried to explain what led Colton to commit all those things and take the wrong path. Bev Davis, a friend of Colton's father and one of them, said that Colton used to break into houses to see how other people lived because he never experienced that feeling with his own family. She continued, saying that he knew his path was wrong but couldn't find anyone to guide him to another life. Since birth, he had only his mother, who struggled to make a future for him. As a teenager, he didn't like school much and had several other problems that got him into trouble with the police. Here, he started to enjoy this because he found a purpose in his life, which was to make the police chase him. His confidence in himself grew after he gained followers worldwide who wanted to know his story and follow his daily routine. The Barefoot Bandit became a hero, as a major newspaper stated. He received significant media coverage, mostly focusing on investigating his past and talking to his mother about how he interacted with others. She said that her son Colton was loving to everyone and deeply loved the forest, which made him relax and forget everything. Jackson Holtz mentioned that on Christmas, Colton's mother asked for a bulletproof vest for her son, which greatly affected him. After asking why she was crying, she said that she knew her son was outside the law and tried to help the police find him, but she still feared for him. The following morning after Christmas, authorities were informed that another plane had taken off from Orcas Island Airport that night. Investigators found footprints drawn in chalk in a grocery store's storeroom. After searching for security camera footage, they found it discarded in one of the water tanks there. Colton was accused after verifying the fingerprints lifted from the store. The fear of the residents increased, prompting the police to launch patrols that alternated between morning and evening. The patrols were equipped with advanced radio devices and lamps, all to keep Colton away from committing another theft. Beverly Topple, the manager of Orcas Island Airport, stated that at this stage, Colton might become more dangerous, expressing concern that they had moved from a Robin Hood phase to a John Dillinger phase. The search intensified from the police's side, and the surprise was that Colton's hideout was found where he had prepared a place to sleep in the airport. The hideout, discovered only after days of searching, was equipped with blankets, pillows, leftover food, a large bag filled with food and water bottles. After this, the police suspected that Colton might try to steal another plane, perhaps one belonging to a pilot named Steven. They were convinced of this because Colton had stolen Steven's wife's car 2 days earlier from their home near the forest. The authorities prepared and FBI agents were stationed at the mentioned house, waiting for Colton's arrival. After midnight, FBI agents heard the door suddenly open. Colton appeared, startled, and decided to close the door and flee into the forest. As he glanced around, he was once again taken by surprise when he saw a group of policemen approaching him. Colton encouraged himself and began to run, paying no heed to what might happen. Fortunately, no one fired at him. The forces pursued him into the forest, and a plane was deployed to scan for his tracks and track him down. The police believed they had captured him after pinpointing his exact location. The search continued for long hours into the night, and he couldn't rest as his location was exposed to the plane that was tracking his traces before stumbling upon a tree of medium height. He climbed it and sat there, waiting for the police to leave. After a short while, the plane's lights shone in front of him, but they did not reveal his location as a military unit accompanied by trained dogs failed to find him. Many months passed without any news about Colton. Some believed he had left the island, while others thought he had met his end alone in the middle of the forest or drowned in the ocean. Many rumors reached the island of Camano, where Colton's mother lived. She contacted the news station to inquire about the matter, but they told her that there was nothing confirmed until that hour. The police learned one day that Colton was still on the island. He stole a boat and headed to Lopez Island, then stole another one there and headed to Camano Island. The evidence used by the police to consider Colton as the culprit was finding a drawing of a barefooted man on the dangerous bridge leading to the boat marina of Lopez Island. His mother was afraid that he was on Camano Island, knowing that he would be shot without mercy if he was found. Indeed, a meeting was held by one of the island's elders who summoned individuals called bounty hunters to apprehend him at any cost, led by the famous bounty hunter Mike Rauscha. He led the search operation, checking all possible hiding places for Colton, from pigsties to boat docks. 3 groups of plainclothes police officers armed with powerful weapons were deployed, authorized to shoot him if necessary. On that night, Colton moved again after stealing a car and driving to a distant location. He wrote a message along with $100 and placed it in a box in one of the animal shelters. The message content: "Take good care of the animals and use this small amount of money to help." Signed, Colton. This evidence made the bounty hunters move again, puzzled by his actions as he kept stealing cars and abandoning them halfway when they ran out of gas, then stealing another. During this period, he managed to enter 6 different airports looking for a suitable plane to execute his plan. 2,000 miles, 9 different states, hundreds of stolen cars, and finally, Colton found his plane in Indiana. He stayed there for several days, waiting for the right moment, and finally, one night he managed to steal the plane for his final journey, flying 1,200 miles south to Abaco Island in the Bahamas. Ricardo Boros, a hunter in the Bahamas, said that he was hunting at the time when he noticed a plane coming from the west and circling around a certain area about 7 times, then it landed quickly. When he went to check the plane, he found that it had crashed, with some of its parts damaged and no one was inside. The news spread quickly before it was known that the teenager nicknamed Barefoot was the one who fell there. FBI agents began contacting local authorities in the area to apprehend him, and a reward of $10,000 was offered for anyone who provided information leading to his arrest. Certainly, here's the corrected version of the text. Dwight Bender, the owner of a gas station in the Bahamas, reported the theft of stolen food items from the station store, along with some sodas. Additionally, authorities found that a woman's house had been broken into and her car stolen following Bender's report. Curtis Mack, the owner of Curly Tail's restaurant, usually checks the surveillance cameras every morning to see what happened the previous night. He noticed that the camera captured the thief, known as Barefoot Bandit Colton, but when he discovered another camera, he redirected it towards the wall. Nothing was missing from the restaurant, but one of the cameras captured the moment Colton stole a boat from there. For a week, Colton became the biggest headline worldwide, proving that the teenage boy from Camano Island showed that police were ineffective when they failed to use their intellect. Rutley Kay, the owner of an internet cafe, recounted how Colton once approached her, asking to use the internet to contact his mother, whom he hadn't seen in over a month. She knew his identity but welcomed him without accepting any money. She even offered him a free sandwich. When interrogated by investigators about why she didn't inform the police at that time, she explained that she had 3 children to care for and raised them alone without assistance from her husband, which made her sympathize with the boy and refrain from contacting the police. Maurice, who was standing near the boat dock, confirmed that someone approached him on a boat and addressed him, saying, "I'm Colton. Call the police, we want to have some fun. Come on, buddy." He then fled again. At that moment, Jamal Brown and his friends jumped into their boat and began chasing him, knowing there was a reward for his capture. The pursuit began, and for minutes, Jamal thought he would catch Colton, but the latter's superior skills allowed him to escape without a trace. Meanwhile, Colton docked the boat somewhere, jumped out, and suddenly collided with a security guard who recognized him. The guard chased him, but Colton managed to disappear into the trees. The guard contacted the police, who instructed him to stay put and not let anyone approach. 2 teams of police officers, led by Officer Moss, were assigned to search the forest and the beaches and boat docks. While the police were immersed in the search, Colton stole another boat belonging to a woman and set off into the ocean, hoping not to be tracked. Unfortunately, he was spotted by Ron and Ronald, who informed the police and pursued him. Colton knew he would escape, as he had done before, but what he didn't anticipate was his boat colliding with a coral reef, rendering it immobile until the police arrived. Facing about 20 bullets aimed at him, he realized his escapades were over and surrendered. Thus, the Bahamian police accomplished what the full force of the American police could not. Eventually, he was extradited to the United States by a private plane and sentenced to 7 years in a Washington state prison. For his antics in the Bahamas, Colton was sentenced to either 3 months in jail or a $300 fine. Unsurprisingly, he opted for the latter, but far weightier punishment awaited him on his return to America, where he was accused of committing approximately 100 different thefts alongside a slew of other charges. Like all trials of this magnitude, there was a lot of legal to-ing and fro-ing going on, but when the dust had settled, Colton was sentenced to 7 years in prison. That might sound like a fairly lenient sentence considering all the fuss he'd caused, but Colton's extremely difficult childhood was seen as a mitigating factor in his subsequent crime spree, as was his age when many of the crimes were committed. In the end, he served fewer than 5 of those years, and on his release in 2016, the attorney who defended him during his trial hired Colton to work at his law firm, a solid indicator of just how much goodwill Colton had accumulated by this point, in spite of his remarkable career as a teenage criminal. These days, by all accounts, he's an upstanding member of society who's put his rebellious teenage years firmly behind him, though in 2016 his parole officer did force Colton to end a crowdfunding campaign aimed at raising enough money for him to get his pilot's license. Too soon, Colton. Too soon. To this day, the story of the Barefoot Bandit remains a polarizing one, and for obvious reasons. On the one hand, Colton was an apparently heartless criminal who practically turned stealing from others into a game. On the other hand, it's pretty hard to blame someone with Colton's upbringing for going off the rails a bit. Okay, a lot, but still. Colton genuinely does seem to want to right the wrongs of his criminal past, too. He's even gone a long way to paying off the $1.4 million in restitution he owes to his many victims, thanks in no small part to selling his story to 20th Century Fox for a 7-figure sum. In the end, Colton stated that he did not intend to attract attention to himself through his actions and that becoming famous was not pleasant. I guess sometimes crime does pay. See you in the next video. Goodbye.